I remember when Bungie first announced sunsetting for Destiny 2, and it was a very memorable and pivotal moment because it was universally unpopular as a decision, and in a strange turn of events, it seems like PlayStation is slowly sunsetting Bungie, as we recently discovered that Bungie Creative Studios is headed to Sony. While some assurances have been made that they're going to continue being dedicated to Destiny and Marathon, it's very clearly a talent loss for the studio. And for those who hope that Sony would be backing off from their live service plans, this development shows that they are full steam ahead. They had a very juxtaposed year with their live service games. Helldivers 2 exceeded all expectations and made a ton of money, and then Concord was a catastrophic flop, and Sony's going to need to chart a more reliable course. You can't have such a big swing from success to failure. And this move with Bungie Creative over to SIE, I think that's what they're aiming at. But it means something very different for Bungie, because they've gone through some pretty big changes lately. They had 2 rounds of layoffs. Their incubation projects were either canceled or getting absorbed into SIE or a new spin-up studio. They apparently had no plans for Destiny 3, this sort of side project they were working on. I think a lot of that's getting absorbed into Destiny 2, as their new content plans are going to include things like survival elements or Metroidvania elements. That sounds like some of their experimental ideas from these other projects are getting brought over to Destiny 2, and they're allegedly moving forward with Marathon, even though I think that they shouldn't be. So where does all of this end up? Where are they going with the various projects, and what are they going to do if they continue to lose talent over to Sony? And ultimately, that really begs the question, why did PlayStation really buy Bungie? Well, that's what we're going to try to figure out. And when I upload a video like this, we head to a live show afterward to discuss it. So if you like this kind of content, hit like and subscribe. So in case you missed it, Bungie Creative Studios is helping lay the foundation for the live service center of excellence for Sony. And that's not really a revelation, okay? This was one of the stated goals when they acquired Bungie. But the reason this is important is because it is a pretty significant movement of employees that were playing pivotal roles at Bungie. PC Gamer reported on this, and I wanted to pull from them because their byline has something that nobody else is saying. Their headline was, "Sony carves off more of Bungie, the Creative Studios team is now officially a part of PlayStation Studios." But it was the byline that caught my attention. It says, PlayStation Creative, formerly Bungie Creative Studios, will continue to work on Destiny 2 and Marathon, as well as all other Sony live service games. Now, I can't find anything official about this PlayStation Creative, but the LinkedIn profiles and the Twitter profiles make it very clear. These employees are no longer employees of Bungie. They are now SIE employees. So, who is moving and why? From the PC Gamer article, they said this: word of the change came from Bridget O'Neill, formerly the Senior Director of Creative Studios at Bungie, now the Senior Director of Creative at PlayStation Studios, who said on LinkedIn that her team is, quote, joining PlayStation Studios to build the foundation for a creative team that can support all PlayStation live service games. So that covers the who and the why, okay? This is a Senior Director, and they're going to help support live service games for PlayStation. And it became more apparent that this was a big loss for Bungie when a design lead joined the LinkedIn announcement trend. Levi Pack was at Bungie for 4 years and moved up from graphic designer to visual design lead in that time. Now, if you remember, when the last round of layoffs happened, it was announced that 155 employees would be absorbed by SIE. That is likely what we're looking at with this announcement. That's probably who these employees are. And while Bridget took to Twitter to soften the blow, saying things like the team would remain dedicated to Destiny and Marathon, all of this really makes you ask the question, what does this mean for Bungie in the short term, and what does it mean for Bungie in the long term? There really is no way around it. This is a huge talent loss for Bungie. And the first thing I thought of was their recent plans for content, as it seems they're sort of shifting into what they're referring to as like a dual DLC or dual expansion approach. There'll be a summer and a winter expansion. One of them is codenamed Apollo, the other is Behemoth, and then it's going to be coupled with what they're calling 4 major updates a year. And in this announcement, they used 3 words that really stood out to me. Future content is going to feature gameplay like things found in roguelikes, Metroidvanias, and survival shooters. Now, we know, especially with roguelikes, how that content loop can flow. You have a character, you start, you get abilities, you get different things and different combinations, but then you die and start over. Metroidvania is in a similar way. You get new abilities, things you didn't previously have, and then you can get into new locations, and survival shooters only really work if you're trying to survive. Limited resources, things that could be potentially reset or unique to an area. Well, this sounds an awful lot like the Project Payback work that was potentially being brought to Destiny. Essentially, Project Payback was a completely separate game. You were going to be playing as heroes. It was maybe even third person, sort of a Monhun open world style game, which makes you wonder why one of the expansions is called Behemoth. And I could actually see this content being brought over to Destiny, and maybe that sort of buys them time, where players could be engaging with completely new mechanics, completely new gameplay loops, okay? This could give them sort of a stay of execution, because this new plan signaled to me that Bungie would be refocusing on Destiny. They want to have more future Destiny content. But this recent shakeup with pivotal creative personnel leaving to go work for SIE, I really have to wonder if this is going to affect that content. The history of Destiny 2 undeniably proves one thing: maintaining content cadence is very difficult for them to do. Some of this is related to the engine, some of this is related to just how much content and how fast it can be played through by the community, but a lot of people felt that one of the best rhythms of content in Destiny's history was when they had High Moon Studios and Vicarious Visions helping with parallel development of seasons and other content pieces and raids and things like that. And now, in the wake of the layoffs, they're not just losing long-standing members to layoffs, they're losing them to Sony. I would expect this to have an effect on their immediate plans and content flow. If Destiny was at its best content cadence and flow when they had two other studios helping them, how are they going to function if they're basically losing studio-sized amount of people to Sony? 40-some people going to a spin-up studio, 155 people going to SIE for the Live Service Center of Excellence, and now they're trying to trudge ahead with this new content plan with less people and less talent. This inevitably makes me wonder, what does this mean for Bungie long-term? Whenever I consider the future of Bungie, the first thing I think of is Destiny 3. It honestly seems crazy to me that they had no plans to make it and instead were making these spin-off projects. I mean, at one level, I do understand it, and I do kind of agree. Destiny has become such a big IP that I cannot see abandoning it, and that maybe is one of the ideas, or the main idea, that led to them thinking they could launch spin-off games. The one was going to be like an open-world, third-person, more adventure-focused game, and maybe they were going to even spin off the PvP into its own experience. But on that same token, if Destiny as an IP, as a franchise, is big enough to branch off into other projects, then how could you not want to make Destiny 3? Is this another Halo situation for Bungie? Have they gotten to the point where they're just tired of making Destiny and they want to move on? And if they do, what does PlayStation think about that? They made it clear that they thought restructuring of Bungie was needed, along with more accountability. And in the wake of the layoffs and the canceling or the absorbing of the incubation projects, it seems that PlayStation wanted Bungie to bring focus back to Destiny and its future. Well, how is that supposed to happen with less talent? Is Destiny 3 even in the cards? And what about Marathon? They're not just losing bandwidth and having a lowered employee count. They have to split their attention between two games going forward. Personally, I think PlayStation wants a Destiny 3, especially with Destiny Rising entering the mobile landscape. You can't have an IP of this size and just have it be in the market this long and abandon the console and the PC market while your mobile game is just getting started. But I also think that Marathon just has no shot. And people keep asking me why. Why do I think that? We don't know anything yet. Well, it's not really about Marathon, it's about the market. Launching a shooter PvP live service game, I just think is a fool's errand. Now, I've got ideas about how you could solve the live service player problem, and none of those ideas really solve the issue of player versus player focused experiences wanting to be live service, because there's just too many major players soaking up all of the gamers, right? When I look at Destiny as an IP, I don't know if a marathon game could actually survive as a PvP live service, because like Destiny's the stronger IP. So when we consider how strong Destiny is as a franchise, and you actually consider Bungie as a developer and this acquisition and all these recent changes, I can really only conclude one thing. I actually think that PlayStation is slowly sunsetting Bungie, and not in the way that you might think. I don't think they want to close Bungie down or sell the studio off. I think what they ultimately want is twofold. First, they want the talent, and second, they want the IP. The thing that I don't think they want is actually Bungie. Now, sure, they may keep the name and keep the studio around, but the leadership will ultimately be replaced, and the studio and its talent and property will be absorbed by PlayStation. Remember the IGN article earlier this year? It spoke about the leadership shakeup, and there was one key paragraph in there that I think is extremely relevant now. It said the following: "Within the company, there is a growing expectation that senior company leadership will leave in droves in the summer of 2026 when the final payouts from Sony's acquisition of the company take effect. With this in mind, there is a strong push to get Marathon out the door before then and let whoever takes the reins after that, be it Sony or Bungie, worry about how it's sustained." It's that last part, sort of the whoever takes the reins, whether it's Sony or Bungie, and with a big departure going over to SIE, it's looking like it might end up being Sony. At first, I thought this would be something that PlayStation would put a stop to. They wouldn't want this sort of thing to happen, but I think this is all part of the plan. Bungie Creative Studios coming over to Sony is just the beginning, because the sun looks like it's setting on Bungie, so it can rise again on Destiny and a new PlayStation first-party studio that will likely be Bungie in name only. But those are just my thoughts, and I'd love to hear yours. You can leave a comment below, and you might get featured in the live stream that follows this. It'll hit a card right here, and we pin a link in the comments below as well. And remember, if you like this content, please remember to hit like, share, and subscribe.